We're going to start with the offense, guys, and we might as well start out with it's not really a battle, but we're going to talk about the position. Let's talk about this quarterback room and what you see from it, Gerald.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really much of a battle to speak of, right? The Mannings said that they would not do NIL deals for Arch until he was the starter, and now, well, he's officially signed with Red Bull for NIL. So I guess some of the drama, not really, there was never going to be drama about who's going to be the starter. But like, I think the real question, honestly, what do we expect from Arch next year? We can talk about that more. But honestly, that QB2 spot, like what does that look like for Texas? KJ Lacey coming in, really highly touted kid. You've got Trey Owens still on campus, right? Who was a kid who Texas swooped in last minute and got from Iowa State, a local kid. So like, what does that backup quarterback position look like? Because I mean, granted, it's Quinn Ewers, but the last 3 years, Texas has had to rely on a backup for a couple of starts throughout the year. So that is honestly the bigger question to me. I think we know not what we're going to get from Arch. We know Arch is going to be QB1, and I think we have a good indication of his talent. But what's going to happen behind Arch is really like the big intrigue for me.
No, I'm the exact same way. We know who the starting quarterback is. Like you said, he's already got the Red Bull deal set up. I'm sure there's going to be others in the pipeline because he's going to get as much money, I'm sure, as he wants on the NIL market.
Big check for sure.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. Is it going to be Trey Owens? Is it going to be KJ Lacey? I guess I'll start off with that conversation. I think whoever becomes the backup here at Texas for this year probably plays a year before, if we keep Diabella in the fold for 26 before he takes over. I really don't see a multi-year starter from those two guys. And that's my opinion. I just think they're going to be a bridge from Arch Manning to Diabella. I think Diabella's very, very special personally. So that's why I think this next guy, the backup, will be the bridge. In my opinion, just what I've seen from KJ Lacey, what I've seen from Trey Owens, very limited. KJ Lacey, obviously 4-star recruit coming in. He's Mr. Football from Alabama. He's a good football player. Trey Owens, big football player, was a 3-star until the very end, then became a 4-star. So a low 4-star guy, like you said, we saw from Iowa State. I think KJ Lacey is going to take that number 2 job, not this year, but next year, most likely. I think Trey Owens will be the backup for this year just because of the experience.
Yeah.
I think this is very similar to a Malik Murphy, Arch Manning situation where Malik Murphy, let's be honest here, really only was the backup that 1 year because Arch Manning was a freshman. As soon as Arch Manning was a sophomore, had some reps under his belt, and even they were practice reps, and then was also able to dive into the playbook, he took that over. I think we're looking at something similar here in this quarterback room. I think Trey Owens, because he's got a head start in the playbook, will be the backup this year. I think KJ Lacey will take that over, be the backup, and then eventually be probably the starter for 1 year.
Yeah, Sark really does value that experience and that ability to operate the offense. And you know what? Trey Owens is a guy who, even if he isn't the backup, I don't imagine him leaving. He is a program guy. Like, there's a reason why he's an Austin kid. He jumped, immediately flipped at that position. And I think this is what we expect, I think, from Texas and from the Texas quarterback room. Is like, we're going to get 2 years of Arch Manning, then we'll get at least maybe a year or 2 of KJ Lacey while Diabella gets up to speed, and then we get 2 years of Diabella, and then we get 2 years of whoever comes back. Like, Texas having routinely a redshirt sophomore that's got 2 years in the pipeline. They play for 2 years. They go pro. Like, that is how Sark, and I think how anybody really wants to manage a quarterback room in this modern day and age, right? Because you get 2 years of Arch. KJ Lacey will come in, be a redshirt sophomore coming in, right, after 2 seasons. He plays for a couple of years. He goes off to the pros, wherever, and then that puts Diabella in a redshirt sophomore situation as well, taking right over. So, like, you're starting to see the machine, especially at the quarterback position, starting to fire up for Texas. This is what Sark wanted to do when he came in. That's why it was so important that Quinn Ewers came in and was able to give them, especially giving them that extra year and that stability. This is what Sark wants out of his quarterback room. Have a guy who's got multiple years in the program, and have your next young cat learning while he's playing. It's really perfect.
100%. And I will say this about Trey Owens. I like what I saw from him in the spring game. I think he's way ahead of where even Arch Manning was 2 years ago when he came in. I think he's ahead of where Malik Murphy when he came in. So I really like that. He's a big guy, 6'5". He's got a pretty good arm. He showed very good touch as well throwing down the field in that spring game. And I think there's a chance, like, honestly, he kind of reminds me, Mac Jones is a little bit shorter, but there's some similarities there with, like, not very well recruited, but then Sark kind of finds them. They get bumped up a little bit. Yeah. If he can learn the playbook, he's got a shot.
Well, and if you look, the thing I think I love the most about Trey Owens coming in is dude is just a baller. Go back and look at some of his high school performances. Dude led his team to multiple comeback victories, and there's something to be said about a guy who's like, I'm signing up to be the guy after the perfect quarterback recruit. It's like, all right, I'm going to come in and I'm going to fight my behind off. Like, there's something to be said about a dude that has that level of confidence, that level of swagger. Like, there is no mistaking or no substituting confidence in a quarterback. It's like if Trey Owens has to come in and play, I feel okay about that because Trey Owens, again, is a guy who came and played at one of the highest levels in the state of Texas, played really well, led his team to a decent run in the playoff, had a couple of comeback victories under his belt, and he's a guy who, again, saw Arch Manning, Texas offered him and said, all right, bet, let's go, right? Like there's something to be said about that.
100%. I don't think he's scared of the competition. And I agree. I think he's more likely to stay at Texas, which means like if he does win the job, I do think KJ Lacey eventually would transfer if that was the case. Yeah. Obviously, we're getting ahead of ourselves with that. But overall, here's another question I'll ask, and we'll go to Arch Manning on this one. What do you expect out of Arch, like stats-wise? I'm personally thinking we're going to see, because I thought Quinn Ewers had a better year 2 years ago than last year, honestly. I think we're going to see from Arch Manning. I think we're going to see sophomore Quinn Ewers at Texas type stats from Arch Manning with a little bit more rushing, obviously, as well.
Yeah, it's hard to call. I think, he does execute that long ball, I think, more accurately than Quinn Ewers. So I think there's going to be some bigger chunk plays. I think there's going to be an opportunity. I think one thing that we have to watch and have to take with a grain of salt is I wonder what the interception numbers are going to look like because he's still, again, we saw a little bit against Georgia when he came in and then those starts, he's still, and again, this was last year, he's going to have a full offseason under his belt. Like the processing speed, being the full-time starter, being able to make those right decisions, he's going to be a first-year starter. Like we have to take all of the Arch Manning conversation with a grain of salt because first-time starter, playing in the SEC, a couple of tough road games in there as well, right? You got Georgia, you've got Florida, right? Those are things that we have to keep in mind. But ultimately, I think we're going to see, I don't know if we see 3,000, but that's a big number, right? So 2,600, a decent number for him, I think, in a sophomore campaign. Rushing, I'm not too sure about just because Sark is not going to run the quarterback intentionally. I think Arch has the wheels to make some things happen on his own, but Sark is never going to run his quarterback heavy like we've seen in other offenses. So that's one that I'm not wanting to put conjecture on, but I think you're absolutely right. 2 years ago, Quinn Ewers type of performance, I think is probably expected.
Yeah, I'm thinking around total between rushing and passing, 3,000 yards, 35 touchdowns, but they're going to see somewhere between 10 to 15 interceptions. I agree. Yeah. I think he's going to throw more interceptions just because he's going to take more risk, which I think Sark's okay with if you're able to hit the deep ball, honestly. I think that's a trade-off he's willing to make because Quinn Ewers really didn't throw that many interceptions, but he also didn't hit as many deep balls. So I think he's willing to make that trade.
It's like the Brett Favre conundrum, right? What do you take? Brett Favre threw a ton of interceptions, but also threw a ton of touchdowns that shouldn't have happened because he was a gunslinger. And I think you got a little bit of that in Arch Manning.
No, my comp, I already tweeted it out. I'm ahead of it. Young Josh Allen. That's who I have. That's who I think he is. Young Josh Allen in the NFL. If anyone remembers watching young Josh Allen, that guy made some absolutely boneheaded mistakes, but then there are other times you'd watch how the hell did he do that? The thing that comes to mind is when he's playing the Texans in the playoffs, he gets stood up and then all of a sudden, hey, I want to throw a lateral here. And then the Texans jump on it and recover. And I'm why did you do that? And I think you're going to see stuff from that from Arch Manning, but you're also going to see big plays that he makes.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that.